Hello, Brian Cram here. Today I'm going to talk about why it's important to upgrade D3 and stay current. The 5 big reasons to upgrade and stay current are stability, security, performance, disaster recovery, and new features. So let's get to it. Stability. Staying current increases a system's stability for several reasons. One, you're less likely to encounter compatibility issues from third-party product updates. 2, you're less likely to find bugs fixed in a later release. And 3, the folks in support and engineering are more familiar with current releases than the old ones because they work on the new ones every day. And once you get current, you need to stay current because the smaller the upgrade path, the easier and cheaper it is to upgrade. Let's talk a little about hardware. Remember, the older hardware gets, the more likely it is to fail, and often at the most inconvenient time, like month end. And if it's really old, it will likely be impossible to replace as is, or rather as was, which means you're forced to upgrade instead of simply replace. Elements of an upgrade include buying hardware or provisioning cloud space, operating system, D3 and third-party software installation, data restoration, and application testing. All of these add up, resulting in significant downtime, which is a lot more costly than uptime. Software and platform deprecation are not as urgent as hardware failure, but are still significant. When an OS reaches end of life, it is no longer patched. This results in operational and security vulnerability. Same is true for D3 itself. We may support the older D3 releases, but we do not normally patch them. We've had a lot of activity and support lately with people running older versions of D3 on Windows 7 and Windows 2008, both of which are now at end of life. So they want to upgrade the OS, then find out their version of D3 is not certified on the later OS. Boom, upgrade time. Had they stayed current, the OS upgrade may not have required a D3 upgrade. Anyhow, I'm starting to ramble a bit, so let's move along. Security. There's another video in this series specifically regarding security, but let me briefly touch on a couple of things. Current OS and D3 versions have better features for securing the platform. SSL has improved. We now have Start TLS for D3 as well as better encryption tools. D3 connections that used to be open are now encrypted. OSFI, MVSP, Hot Backup, to name a few. Also, we now have SSH for D3 Windows and host authentication for all D3 platforms. All of this makes it much easier to pass those pesky security audits. Like I said, more on that in a later video. Performance. Again, there's another video in this series specifically regarding performance, but let me highlight a couple of things. D3 is now 64-bit, so are the operating systems underneath D3. This gives D3 more memory for users and data caching. Also, some improvements have been made in ABS modes, the D3 Windows FSI, and the D3 Unix disk read-write architecture. Also, newer hardware is faster hardware. Again, more on that in a later video. Disaster recovery. One of the best things D3 has to offer in the area of disaster recovery is the Hot Backup feature. Hot Backup was introduced in D3 Windows back in 9.0 and in D3 Unix earlier than that, but has been significantly improved in the later versions, particularly 10.3. Hot Backup gives you a second D3 instance that is updated real-time and instantly ready for failover. Several configurations are available, including a single pair of physical servers in the same location to protect against machine failure, a single pair of physical servers in separate locations to protect against site failure, a cascading trio of physical servers with primary and secondary servers in the same location and a tertiary server in a separate location to protect against machine and site failure, one physical server paired to a cloud instance, one cloud instance paired to another cloud instance, and other configurations as well. Of note is the fact that the tunnel between the two D3 Unix instances is now SSL encrypted as of 10.3. And Hot Backup is not all. With the growing popularity of virtual hosting, like VMware, it has become much easier to snapshot D3, not only for disaster recovery, but for setting up test environments as well. One important feature added to D3 is the database FOS feature on D3 Unix. This allows you to keep D3 running in memory with no flushing to disk for the duration of the snapshot, thereby ensuring the integrity of the snapshot. This is much more convenient than shutting down D3 just to take a snapshot. Without this feature, you risk not getting a clean snapshot of D3 and getting errors if you try to run from a restored snapshot taken when D3 was running. I mentioned the cloud before. D3 in the cloud benefits from cloud infrastructure that protects against normal crash concerns, like a power failure or some Yahoo accidentally hitting the reset button or pulling the plug. And again, as I mentioned before, a lot of people are moving their backup service to the cloud or moving everything to the cloud altogether. The advancements D3 10.3 has made in the area of encryption and SSL make the cloud a safer home for D3. Connectivity. In older versions of D3, we had, and still have, an ODBC server for D3. This allows outside entities to query and/or update D3 via SQL. D3 also has the ODBC class libraries to allow the use of Visual Basic versions 4, 5, and 6 to write GUI apps for D3. We also have Flash Connect, which basically turns D3 into an HTML web page publisher. These two features are still supported and maintained, but not being enhanced. In D3 9.0, another connection method was introduced, MVSP, or the Multi-Value Server Protocol. This is a server-side listener that is designed for use with the MVSP.NET and Java APIs, allowing a much more modern and versatile interface than the old VB6 solution. MVSP and the APIs were introduced in 9.0, but have been vastly improved in the later versions. One of the first MVSP applications written using the Java API was the MVS Web Services Toolkit, which is a way to publish D3 data via web services. This is huge. The entire planet has gone nuts over RESTful services, which can be consumed by browsers, phones, other servers running other applications, darn near everything. The toolkit has significantly improved since it was introduced with MVSP back in 9.0, and it's really worth a look. Another really cool connectivity product is OpenDB. This is a product that allows D3 to access external SQL databases from AQL or basic programs using super queue pointers. This allows D3 to keep itself synced with external databases by either callx triggers or batch-oriented background processes. You can even edit an external SQL database from TCL using ED or the update processor, though I'm not recommending that, other than for proof of concept or debugging. Additional new features. A lot of cool new stuff in the latest 10.3 release of D3, including a native Python interface, MVBase functionality, basic language compiler debugger enhancements, and other utilities. A new feature that's getting all the press is Python. It's a big topic that will be the subject of in-depth future sessions, so I'm not going to deep dive on it here. I'll just mention that Python is very currently relevant, very familiar to young programming talent, and rich with open source libraries. Again, more on that in future sessions. MVBase is another flavor of multi-value. The latest and final release is 3.3. Much of what was put into D3 10.3 was MVBase functionality, allowing D3 to be the MVBase upgrade path. There's a lot of stuff that came over from MVBase in terms of features, but the two that stand out for me are the workstation and the concept of user-defined functions in BASIC. The workstation is a component that allows you to manage local printer and telnet connections to a D3 server in a remote physical or cloud location over a single TCP port. This again is huge. It eliminates the need for every remote office to be connected to a central D3 server using a VPN. User-defined functions is something that D3 developers have been screaming about for years. These were implemented both as internal and external functions that are basically subroutines with a single return value. It's a lot easier to say print function X than it is to say X equals something, call subroutine passing X, print X. The internal subroutine version was ported from MVBase. The external subroutine version was lifted from U2. Conditional compiler directives give you the ability to do things like tell the compiler whether or not to flash compile the source, compile a block of code only if running as a particular flavor, embed comments like copyrights in object code, and more. There's a lot of other stuff, too much to mention, so I'll just close with one utility that is my favorite enhancement in 10.3. List locks. List locks now has the ability to filter its results by PIB and or file, meaning that you can pass it a PIB number and see only the locks associated with that PIB. Or you can pass it a file name and see only the locks associated with that file. Or pass it a PIB number and a file and see only locks for that PIB operating on that file, or multiple PIBs or multiple files. You get the drift. This gives you the ability to only display what you care about at the moment without pouring through pages of data that you don't care about at the moment. But maybe even cooler than that is the ability to display the date and time at which the lock was set. As I've said before, that's huge. Imagine not having to sit there doing a watch list locks while you're holding a stopwatch. Well, that's about it for me. Hope you now have a good understanding of why it's important to get current and stay current. To make a stupid analogy, it's a lot easier to regularly change your oil than it is to replace your engine. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Most of you know where to find me. Thank you.